Okay, hey everyone, welcome to an episode of On the Rest from Off the Cuff. To have another cool prototype preview for you guys from the brand St. Bones. They're a relatively small yet ambitious independent watchmaking and jewelry brand founded in 2017 and based out of Vienna, Austria. They're a premium fashion brand known for their unique design aesthetic inspired by French Gothic architecture, fusing a melting pot of opposing influences and materials into proudly offbeat watchmaking. Now, in terms of type of watch, you could consider this a bit of an everyday watch. Some key common characteristics and design language, you're looking for something you can wear every day. Of course, we're going to find that versatile blend of both sporty and dressy attributes. I'd say this is almost even borderline kind of signature watch slash wild card watch because it is a little bit further out there when it comes to its design and then of course its use of special materials. This is known as their Element 22X in the forged carbon dial. This is a prototype and they describe it as a titanium automatic watch developed by St. Bones, a Vienna-based atelier working at the intersection of jewelry craftsmanship and watchmaking. The project explores a single material grade 5 titanium or element 22. Not just the case, but every structural component is titanium: case, bezel, case back, crown, screws, including the movement ring. This is uncommon at this level and significantly affects weight, feel, and machining complexity. These are going to go for a planned retail of €1,700, but you can get them via Kickstarter coming soon, depending on when you watch this video, for anywhere in between €1,100 to $1,450 via that Kickstarter campaign. Of course, this is a prototype, and the final product design in terms of the way that it looks aesthetically, but not necessarily the final finishing type. So we can expect that, of course, they're going to refine, this further for the full production model. So with that said, let's go and zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, so very dynamic in terms of its styling as well as the material choices here, guys. But in terms of the dimensions, 41 millimeters in diameter, just 9 millimeters thick, or I say 9 millimeters thin, and then 46.2 millimeters lug to lug. Of course, that's all from my own calipers. This is full solid grade 5 titanium, matte blasted with, of course, some accents along the way. As you can see, there's even like a little beveling done on those drilled or pierced lugs. So I think that's very cool. And of course, again, the fact that they went through the painstaking details of making the hardware titanium as well, the movement holder, everything. So I think that is very, very cool. So there is a flat sapphire with an inner AR coating. You do have this fixed bezel, which is screwed in, and you can see there's a bit of a wabi-sabi in terms of the direction on these screws, meaning that they are actual screws. They're not ornamental, which I can appreciate, and I think thematically suits the watch. The crown is a push-pull crown that is nicely signed, as you guys can see there. And thanks to there being no crown guards, crown positioning, although it's kind of smaller, works really well, really easily, and from a tactile engagement standpoint. The case back is actually a display case back that uses a sapphire crystal as well. And then the movement inside, some of you probably recognize that as your automatic Sellita SW300. This is a top grade unit, which is nice. And you're also going to get that more updated 58-hour power reserve with a full 4 hertz sweep. So 28,800 vibrations per hour in terms of that beat rate. So really, really handsome movement, very, very thin, of course, ties in, and just premium choices all the way around. Now, in terms of that dial, check that out. Forged carbon dial with applied indices, polished hands. It's using unspecified lume, but it does have that old radium tone during daylight, and of course, green tone in night. So it wasn't specified, but again, this is coming from a brand that's more of a luxury fashion brand. So a lot of those specs aren't necessarily their selling points. They're not, it's a lot of choices are made due to the aesthetics. And I have to say the aesthetics here are very compelling. Let me give the crystal a quick little wipe here. And, ooh, yes. That is a beautiful look. And again, I think it's still quite masculine, and I don't think it's over-designed. It definitely is a bit eccentric and maybe even polarizing, but I will say it's quite handsome. And, you know, somebody who's not into watches, I could easily see really being into this watch. And of course, if you are into watches, then these little details, the choice of materials, the choice of movement, the thinness, like the drilled lugs, all those things are going to impress you. But I could say just based off of aesthetics and design only, that this can be something that I could easily see somebody seeing as, oh, that's a premium product. I like premium things. I like nicer pens and pocket knives and vehicles. And maybe I'm not into watches, but that looks like a nice and special watch. And it absolutely, look at that shifting of the texturing on that dial with the forged carbon. Very, very cool. I love the organic kind of movement and play with the light there. But with all that said, let's actually get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, or 19 centimeters in circumference, it wears quite well. Full size, definitely, but oversized, not so much. I will say it is so thin, though. It does spread that visual weight really well, maybe to its own detriment, and maybe it makes it seem a little oversized. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you're going to notice quite a bit of perspective distortion, right? It's going to make the sides of my wrist fall away, thus the sides of the strap, and make the watch seem like it's much larger, versus here you can see it seems a lot better centered when you can still see the sides of the strap draping a bit, right? You can see the sides of my wrist. Again, nothing's changing with the proportions of the watch. It's just the perspective. So what I'll do is I'll keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the frame here so that you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. And you guys can see beautifully thin. Of course, that full titanium construction is very impressive. The angles here, you can see a nice little organic downturn on those lugs. Ooh. One thing also to mention, 20 millimeter lug width, so you can swap this out, but then you'd be missing out on that nicely signed hardware, which of course matches the case in terms of its finishing there. That's just, it's a quick release rubber strap, 20 millimeter lug width there. So, if you want to put this on like a really nice pass-through nylon NATO style strap, that's also an option. I think this aesthetically does suit the watch really well, but of course you can always kind of dress it up and, make it a little bit more accustomed to your own personal styling. So with that 20 millimeter lug width, which is quite universal, you will have all of those options. But my goodness, look at this. What a good looking piece. And again, they've only been around since 2017, so it's been, they're going on 10 years, but clearly they've learned a lot within those 10 years, because they are producing something that looks this good. I think, of course, this model compared to the rest of their existing lineup is going to be one of the more versatile watches. Their other ones are, I think very niche by comparison. And even this, being their most versatile, probably tells you about how niche the rest of the brand lineup is, because I think this is still quite niche. But again, if this had a different brand on it, I could easily see this garnering a lot more attention. So I think, of course, St. Bones, they are known for something very niche. But if this was a more mainstream brand, even a brand that went away like this, I could see a brand like Eterna, producing something like this, just because a lot of their designs were more dynamic, and at the same time, execution more premium. So you're going to get a lot of that here, where it's just the thinness, the materials, it's just really cool and really different. Maybe even too cool for me. Like, can I wear this watch regularly? I don't know if I'm cool enough. I don't know if I dressed well enough. But I think there's a lot of people out there that are still, very fashionable, more fashionable than I. And I could easily, again, I see this in that kind of vein of, a fashion watch, but just executed to a much, much higher level, a very impressive level in terms of the complexity of execution, in terms of the choice in materials, the grade of the materials used, even the Swiss movement, of course, being top grade, fully decorated. It's a looker, and it's also a performer. So I appreciate that. So with that said, let's get this off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, the light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Check it out. Very nice Lume. And no, this isn't a dive watch. This isn't some adventure watch. It's just a watch that's well executed. So, of course, it's Lume, being one of its attributes, will also be well executed as well. So I appreciate that. But one thing I always like to work in is going to be a bit of a low light transition, because I know it's going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And I have to say, very, very handsome. Look at that dial. It's the real star of the show. Of course, apart from the titanium housing and construction there, I do like the plays of different matted surfaces there. I like the very bold and legible indices. I think sometimes you might miss that 12, but that's only because they have their logo there, which is reflective, of course, high polished. So in a dark space, or, you know, reflecting off of a dark camera lens, it's not going to stand out as much. But in reality, it absolutely will. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. It's like, you know, a Rolex Oyster Perpetual or something, where they'll have the crown there at the 12 o'clock. Guess what? It doesn't harm legibility, but, you know, maybe it might harm legibility while photography, you know, while shooting, whether it be video or photography, so stills or motion capture, you know, depending on how light reflects. Which, look at the light play on that dial. It's almost like water. It has just a nice organic flow to it. Oh, I'm getting a little sidetracked. Okay, so we'll get the lights back on here. Get into some closing thoughts, guys. On the wrist, comfortable wear, rides low, slung, and thin. Indices, although less complex, are pushed more to the center, which dials in the visual proportions to balance the slightly upsized physical footprint. Yeah, 41 millimeters. Again, I would not consider that oversized. I don't consider it mid-sized. It's just right there in most people's sweet spot, which means it makes sense for something like this. They do have a smaller dial and a larger bezel in terms of kind of those proportions and ratios. So I think, again, this wears really well. It's the only reason why it might seem a little bit larger is because it's so thin that it feels real flat, which, you know, undoubtedly is going to make you feel like the watch is a bit bigger. So I think they probably could have went with a smaller footprint. Maybe they will in the future. But again, this is really meant to be something quite special and not standard dress watch. So we can't necessarily just assign our own sensibilities to it when clearly this was designed and executed with a fair amount of deliberateness, right, in terms of its thematic execution. Now, in terms of comparable models, model variants. This is actually will also be available in a White Meteorite dial option. Check the Kickstarter links in the description for current campaign status, though. If you're interested to learn more, that white one will also have a matching white rubber strap. So that's where it's going to differ, and it's going to be a bit of the yin to the yang here. Now, in terms of comparable models, this is a very niche but interesting space, guys. These types of independent pseudo-luxury pieces can often go very complication heavy, right? When you start thinking about tourbillons, manual wind chronographs, moon phases and everything like that. And a lot of the times brands do that to kind of help justify the price point. While in the case of the Element 22X, I think they go high concept on the material side. Component wise, I think they really hit the mark for the price point in terms of premium choices and complex execution. So a little bit bit different again, but that's kind of their vibe, right? They're proudly offbeat in terms of their watchmaking style. So for me, guys, bottom line, while the St. Bones brand may not be for everyone, the Element 22X line is definitely their most versatile offering yet. And while still showcasing a very particular aesthetic, I do think it has the potential for some semi-mainstream crossover appeal, right? Again, I think there will be certain spec hunters that really enjoy something like this, value hunters that are, that have, pretty outrageous grails in mind, that might have similar, similar themes, but this is going to be a lot more affordable. So, I think, again, that crossover space is just going to be mainly attributed to this feeling premium and looking quite expensive to my eye. Like, I think people who aren't into watches will see this and think that it is an expensive watch. I think if you're into pocket knives and pens and EDC, you'll see this as, oh, that looks like a premium product. If you are into the watch game particularly, and you have, you kind of your own outlook on a lot of things, this might not hit the marks for you. And I think that that's fine, because I think this is a brand that isn't really trying to market to everyone. And even their play here at something that would have crossover appeal still has a very signature theme. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please hit like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.